Welcome to Wired That Way. Let's understand and explore what's underneath the canvas of human behavior and what they do with it. Before psychology could understand why humans behave the way they do, it had to answer a more fundamental question. How do we study human behavior in the first place? That's exactly what the Research Methods chapter from 40 Studies That Changed Psychology, written by Roger R. Hawk, explores. These studies weren't just about behavior. They were about learning how to discover truth without fooling ourselves. And the journey starts with a very unusual character, a horse. In the early 1900s, a horse named Clever Hans amazed audiences across Germany. People believed Hans could solve arithmetic problems. If you asked him, "What is 3 plus 2?" he would tap his hoof 5 times. Crowds were stunned. Some even believed this horse possessed extraordinary intelligence. But a psychologist named Oskar Pfungst decided to investigate more carefully. Instead of assuming the horse was doing math, he asked a different question. What if Hans is simply reacting to people? Through controlled experiments, Pfungst noticed something fascinating. Hans performed correctly only when the person asking the question already knew the answer. As Hans tapped his hoof, the audience would unconsciously change their posture, facial expression, or tension the moment the correct number was reached. The horse wasn't calculating. He was reading humans. This discovery became famous as the Clever Hans effect, and it revealed something deeply important about research. Sometimes researchers unintentionally influence the results of their own experiments. From this moment on, psychology realized experiments must be carefully designed to avoid bias. It also paved the way for techniques like double-blind studies, where neither the participant nor the experimenter knows the expected outcome. In other words, psychology learned its first humbling lesson. Humans are very good at fooling themselves. But sometimes the problem isn't accidental bias. Sometimes the problem might be the data itself. This brings us to the controversial case of Cyril Burt. Burt was a respected psychologist who studied identical twins separated at birth. His research suggested that intelligence was largely inherited. His findings were widely accepted for years. But later researchers noticed something strange. As Burt's sample size increased over time, the statistical correlations in his data remained exactly the same, even down to several decimal places. In real scientific research, numbers almost never behave that perfectly. After Burt's death, many scientists began questioning whether the data had been fabricated. The controversy shook the psychological community and forced researchers to confront a difficult truth. Even respected scientists must be questioned. From this case emerged stronger expectations for replication, transparency, and data verification. Science, after all, must be able to correct itself. But research methods don't only protect science from fraud. They also help us understand the powerful ways expectations shape reality. One of the most fascinating demonstrations of this came from psychologists Robert Rosenthal and Lenore Jacobson. In their famous classroom experiment, teachers were told that certain randomly selected students were intellectual bloomers who were expected to show dramatic academic improvement. In truth, the students had been chosen randomly. But by the end of the year, those same students actually performed better academically. Why? Because the teachers, without realizing it, treated them differently. They gave them more encouragement, more patience, and more opportunities to participate. This study revealed the Pygmalion effect, the idea that expectations can influence outcomes. And from a research perspective, it reinforced the importance of controlling experimenter expectations during studies. But perhaps one of the most emotionally powerful experiments in psychology came from Harry Harlow. Harlow wanted to understand how attachment forms between infants and caregivers. In his studies with baby monkeys, he separated them from their biological mothers and offered them 2 artificial substitutes. One was made of wire and provided milk. The other was soft cloth but provided no food. If survival depended only on nourishment, the monkeys should have stayed with the wire mother, but they didn't. They overwhelmingly clung to the soft cloth mother, seeking comfort and security. This experiment transformed how psychologists understood emotional attachment. It demonstrated that bonding is not just about feeding. It is about comfort, safety, and emotional connection. However, the study also raised serious ethical concerns because of the distress experienced by the animals. As a result, psychology began developing stricter ethical guidelines for research involving both animals and humans. Across all of these studies, one theme keeps appearing again and again.
That's it for now. Like, share, and subscribe for more interesting videos. Have fun finding about yourself.